Good morning, Dan and Amy. And this morning, John Sununu, former George H.W. Bush White House Chief of Staff, was on CNN addressing the Kushner stories over the weekend. And he tore CNN up. And remember, Sununu was not a Trump supporter. We had him on the show.
Oh, yes.
Not a Trump fan. Hearing from a lot of people over the weekend about this Kushner story that have been more than willing to criticize Trump where they thought it was warranted. Sununu, who you're about to hear from, Lindsey Graham, others, Kim Strassel, even in the Wall Street Journal. But just on the merits of these stories that are coming from the D.C. press corps and the absolute lack of evidence to substantiate them and the curiousness of the forever anonymous leakers, people don't know what to believe and what not to believe. And I'm talking about people like Lindsey Graham on the Senate Intelligence Committee. I'm not talking about your average citizen. And here's John Sununu on point.
Look, it's now 7 months since the election. And to this day, no one has cited a single piece of evidence. In your last session, you guys were patting yourselves on the back because you said Clapper had passed the responsibility off to the FBI. But you forget that in the last weeks of the administration, Obama allowed all his intelligence agencies to share their information. And there is no question in my mind that when that happened, since Clapper's group had originated this, that anything the FBI had would have gone back to Clapper. So it's nice for Clapper to try and wash his hands of it by throwing it in the FBI's lap, but he had access in those days to whatever the FBI had. There is nothing there.
Nothing there, and Clapper was on Meet the Press this weekend and said this.
I have to say, at the time I left, I did not see any smoking gun certitude evidence of collusion.
And so on the story, the latest development in the spy novel the D.C. press corps is feverishly trying to write.
In the 10 weeks between an election and an inauguration, there is a lot of discussion going on between all members or potential members of an administration with all kinds of folks. When I was named Chief of Staff, a lot of ambassadors that were slight acquaintances tried to become good friends in that 10 weeks. It is not unusual. You guys have made back channel a derogatory term. A back channel is a positive asset. Nixon could not have done China. Nixon could not have done China without a back channel.
Yes, even
Kennedy
if it
used back channel.
Well,
yeah.
for more,
and John Kelly said, even the Homeland Security Director said back channels, it's a smart thing to do.
For more on this topic and a few other matters of legality, constitutionality, we're pleased to be joined again by our friend, Professor Randy Barnett, Georgetown Law Professor, author of the book, Our Republican Constitution, Securing the Liberty and Sovereignty of We, the People. Professor Barnett, thanks for joining us. And what is your response to the decision to appoint a special counsel, former FBI Director Bob Mueller? And go ahead, start there.
I think special counsels tend to be very bad ideas. They create a prosecutor whose interest is in basically prosecuting particular named individuals. And it's not that they never can work, but they have a tendency to expand their mandate. Once they're in existence, then they get other assignments piled on top of them. They just tend to be not great ideas.
But do you believe in this special prosecutor, though, Robert Mueller? Is he an up-and-up guy? Is he, live by the letter of the law?
We'll find out. Let's put it this way. If he clears the Trump administration, his sterling reputation will be no more. He will then be just a hack like everybody else.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, just like the back and forth in terms of Comey's standing in the minds of the D.C. set. The matter of this more generally, particularly on the side that is now going underreported, if not totally unreported, which is the leaking of classified information, the unmasking of General Flynn's name. This all seems to have been set aside by the D.C. press corps, but it is something that Mueller could go back and address as part of his investigation, isn't it?
Yeah, he could, and I wish he would. As long as you're going to have one, let him investigate something that's probably illegal. Going back to the opening setup you have here, um, you should, first of all, identify a crime that's been committed. And so far, I haven't heard of any crimes that have been committed. Collusion, whatever that might mean, is not a crime.
Mm-hmm.
I used to be a Cook County State's attorney, as you know, from my previous appearances on the show. I never had personal knowledge of whether any particular crime had taken place when I was a prosecutor. I always had to rely on evidence to tell me whether somebody was likely to be guilty or not, beyond reasonable doubt. Either in charging a person or prosecuting a person, I had to go by the evidence. And so far, there has been no evidence whatsoever revealed or leaked that there has been any crime committed by President Trump, which is the main issue here. And given the fact that every conceivable thing has leaked that presumably exists, we would know about it if it had happened. We would have known about it before the election if it had happened. The Obama administration was actively pursuing this matter through their intelligence community, through their appointees in the intelligence community. The fact that Clapper is on the news and Brennan are on the news saying we've not seen anything, it means there isn't anything. And so then there is no crime.
Well, and that's
no crime should be no prosecutor, and no prosecutor, we should be able to move on and have a peaceful transfer of power, which is one of the constitutional hallmarks of our country.
Well, and this is the point that Alan Dershowitz, among others, has made. No Trump supporter, of course, a self-identified Hillary voter, and said, "Look, point to a statute. What is the statute under which this investigation is proceeding? What is the alleged crime, as you're saying?" And it seems to me, I know this is asking you to comment on communication strategy, but it seems to me this is something that Republicans could rinse and repeat over and over again until they get an answer to the question, what's the statute? Point to the statute that has been violated or even allegedly violated.
Right. I mean, Alan was my not my criminal law professor. I had him for a different course, but he was my professor when I was in law school. He's a stand-up guy. He's a ACLU civil libertarian liberal of the old school, who I have a great deal of respect for, and I'm with him on this issue. There hasn't been anything. This is the Comet Pizza for Democrats, basically.
Well,
they've worked themselves into a lather about this, and they won't let it go because their objective is either to delegitimate this particular presidency, like they did with George Bush after Bush v. Gore. He was selected, not elected. Or hopefully to impeach him and remove him for office as they successfully removed Richard Nixon from office after he won a landslide victory. This is what their objective is.
all right. What do you think? I mean, in their defense, they say that they needed a special prosecutor because the FBI director who was in charge of the investigation was fired by President Trump.
Investigation into what? First, you have to name a crime that has allegedly been violated, and then you investigate it. But there has been no such. There has just been talk. There's just been allusion to collusion. And
nice.
that's all we've got.
Nice.
That's a hashtag.
That's a nice turn of a phrase there, Professor.
Yeah, you can go places with that.
Let me ask you on another legal matter. The Fourth Circuit last week declined to overturn the district court ruling enjoining President Trump's temporary ban on immigrants and refugees from certain countries. So this executive order now gets appealed to the Supreme Court. How is it likely to fare at that level?
I really can't say. I've been following this in the press. I have not been reading the pleadings. I have not listened to oral argument in these cases, in all of the executive order cases. I'm skeptical about the challenges, but I can't say that I have an expert opinion about them.
And another question before we let you go. I mean, just in terms of what's happening in academia, what's happening on college campuses, and that certainly includes professional schools like law schools in this country, everywhere. And, it's kind of come to a head in certain points, Berkeley with rioting, and now this student takeover of Evergreen State University in Olympia, Washington, the end of last week. And I just kind of wonder, as somebody who's on a college campus and teaching some of the best and brightest, Georgetown Law School, where you've come down in terms of the state of the academy in this country, what's happening on college campuses?
Well, first of all, you'll notice very, very few stories, if any stories, are about law schools.
It's true.
These are usually undergraduate institutions. In fact, the Georgetown Law campus is away from the undergraduate campus. We're near Capitol Hill. We're near the Supreme Court. So generally speaking, law schools are not subject to this much unrest, shall we say. Law schools are very left-wing, and we tend to have a left-wing faculty. But these are also faculty members who have a tendency to believe in civil liberties, like Alan Dershowitz. And so you tend to not see those on law school campuses. But we are seeing an unfortunate incidents on other campuses. But we always have to remember that the newsworthy stories are the unusual ones. You have campus after campus, you have hundreds and hundreds, thousands of higher education institutions about which there are no such stories going on. So we always have to temper what we hear in the news media from the reality of the situation.
Yeah, I think the number, though, has dropped from the thousands to the hundreds to the dozens, or it is quickly. I mean, just in the last, just over the weekend, there's stories out of UCLA, out of Davidson, in addition to Evergreen State, that are all of the same sort of the unrest, the totalitarianism, the push for postmodern neo-Marxism on campus, and the elimination of dissent to those who don't hew that line.
I don't deny this is happening. I would recommend people who are interested in this follow the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, FIRE, who follow these matters closely. I support FIRE myself. But again, I just wouldn't get carried away by what I see on the press or what I hear in social media about what the underlying reality is at most places. This is something we ought to be concerned about. The left has marched through the higher institutions of higher education. We ought to be concerned with what our kids are learning as students, as much as we are with the phenomenon that you've been reporting on, that has been reported.
He is Randy Barnett, Georgetown law professor, author of the book Our Republican Constitution, Securing the Liberty and Sovereignty of We the People. Professor Barnett, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Always great to be here, Dan and Amy.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The more you